Hi, everyone. It's Emil. It's Emil Guillermo. Emil Amok to you, just as the signage would suggest. Emil Amok's takeout. I'm the aforementioned Emil Amok. Because we're still taking out, right? We're not dining in anymore till further, at least in California. At least in Cal. I mean, it's the mandate is on. We got a mandate, a person date. We got a an in, an instruction to wear our masks, and we will. I always carry mine around. I got my mask here. Got one of these washable jobs. Don't ask me when I last washed it. I washed it. I like that. This is an Israeli mask. You know, they were so far ahead on everything, right? And but they hooked me on buying one of theirs. I got one of their masks. Anyway, mask up, mask mandate is on. Except in L.A., they delayed the mandate for the schools. So the mask mandate is on everywhere else in LA, but in the schools, they're delaying it because most of the kids aren't vaccinated, which makes you wonder, say, get vaccinated. Look, this show exists on the web as the balanced, all those people, the non-vaxxers who say, oh, don't get vax. Oh, your freedom is more important. No, your life is more important. I'm here to say your life is more important. Get vaccinated. Everyone's lives are more you when you wear a mask, you protect giving your germs to other people. When you get vaccinated, you contribute to the stopping of the spread, the positivity rate, the spread of the virus. It only makes sense. You wouldn't go to war without a gun. The vaccine is your gun. Your gun against the virus, because it's a war on the virus. So you got to talk to people on the other side, like, oh, you mean the vaccine is like a gun? Well, I got to get one of those. I got to get two of those. One for the gun rack, and then one I can just carry in my person because I want to. I'm in a right to carry state. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Do that. Don't get twice the shots though. Just one. Oh, actually, get vaccinated, get your full dose, and then get boosted. Because this is the sad truth about what we know. We know that the Omicron, and say it the Greek way. I'm big on saying Guillermo, which is the way the Filipinos say it. I don't say it the Spanish way because I don't honor the colonizers. But I say Guillermo. That's the way the Filipinos say it. So we should be saying AW, Omicron. Just think of like a Valley girl saying, wow, oh my God. Oh, they would say, oh my God, right? It's really Omicron. I know because I read it in the Wall Street Journal, the news section, which is, not as doctrinaire as the editorial. The editorial, they're right wing. The news section, they're objective. Anyway, this is show number 201 of our little thing we do here, 2 p.m. Pacific Live, Monday through Friday. And you've checked your sundials. You say, wow, you started, it's only like 151 Pacific now. Yeah, I'm giving you a little something extra. But we are going to hold it to like a 30-minute show plus something extra. So we might go 45 or something. But that's it. That's it. Because, we've done 200 shows. And I like to listen to the charter members, the charter listenership, and they say, "Well, Emil, what if you only go like 30 minutes?" Yeah, sure. Actually, the original idea was to call it Emil in a minute or so, and then go about 5, 10, 15. Actually, we're going to move a lot of our live stream to the podcast. I mean, I want you to experience this live because live is dangerous. Live is like, oh, what's happening right now? and then we could just be live together. I mean, we can't like exist in person together, but we can be live together, which is almost as good, right? I think. I mean, it's dangerous if we were together, alive, like breathing our plosives at each other. We wouldn't be breathing; we'd be breathing each other's plosives. You know, I once did a joke last year in a group of other comedians and semi-comedians, and I said, "Well, you can't go live because you might spit." And one guy said, "I don't get that because we don't ordinarily spit on stage." And I said, "Have you ever sat in the front row? You spit on stage." He said, "Oh, I didn't realize that." He was thinking broadly, like the spit take, like. No, I'm not thinking about that. Anyway, this is show 201. Got a lot to talk about. We'll talk more about Stephen Curry. Big night for him. Talk about coronavirus more. Mark Meadows, PETA, cancer, diverse, Harvard, the Harvard Crimson. 200 plus shows I'm doing. But first, to kick this off, I want to talk about someone who died recently, like yesterday, or it was reported today. Bell Hooks. Man, I don't know Bell Hooks' work as well as I should, but she keeps popping up. I see her name. I read her little clips. She was in Kentucky, and she wrote about her section of Black Appalachia. Her book is called Belonging, A Culture of Place. Here's a segment that someone put out on the web that was particularly touching. Again and again, as I travel around, I am stunned by how many citizens in our nation feel lost, feel bereft of a sense of direction, feel as though they cannot see where our journeys lead, that they cannot know where they are going. Many folks feel no sense of place when they know what they have is a sense of crisis, of impending doom. That kind of describes where a lot of us are. Like, you see the news, you see what's happened in Kentucky, you see with the tornado, Joe Biden was there just within the hour. More relief on its way. You think about, some people are beginning to question, is it the climate crisis or is it just bad weather? They say, like they don't want to admit it. But there's a lot of people going around wondering, like, oh, wow. Especially if you're of a certain age, you wonder, like, what is next? I've lived through the first swing of rights. I mean, if you look at the rights movement is beginning officially with 64 when it was codified, we have moved through more than 50 years. Same with the Voting Rights Act, 65. Roe v. Wade was only, 40 years, right? 50 years. I mean, the idea is that we were swinging one way, looking like we were on the direction of kind of freedom, no matter where you were. And now it appears as if we have hit the apex of where that swing was. And now we're heading back. To where? How low? I mean, you look at that Meadows vote, to recommend that the Justice Department bring charges against him. That should have been unanimous. That should have been unanimous. If you believe in the rule of law, if you believe that Congress, these are our leaders. And there was no unanimity against what Mark Meadows did or failed to do. Actually, they were just voting on whether or not, did he ignore Congress criminally by just saying he wasn't going to show up. That's bad. That's what they were voting on. But you see Mark Meadows' actions, which is the subject of it all. The tweets he got, the communication between him and Trump, and Trump's inaction, his inaction. And you see people with their false loyalty or blind loyalty to Donald Trump, and you wonder, where are we going? At some point between 1964 and now, I thought I knew. I know many of you thought you knew. I don't know if we know anymore. Not when something like a vote on whether or not Mark Meadows should be criminally held in contempt isn't unanimous by the Congress, which is supposed to uphold the rule of law, at least, more than a couple hundred. On the other side, think that Mark Meadows, what he's done, is okay. Hard to explain. But that kind of division is now seeping into Congress. One of the good signs, though, is that a lot of the really so-called bad congressmen, the congressmen who don't want to seem to compromise or don't want to acknowledge that the big lie is a lie, a lot of those people just are leaving. I hear Mo Brooks is going to resign or retire. Devin Nunes from California, who's not far away from where I stand right now, he's being kind of redistricted out, and he's going to be in an area that is going to be more Democratic. So he's taking his retirement, which is not insignificant, going to join the Trump media. And what's that mean about Congress? It means that some people realize that Congress isn't as important as it could be or should be, and there are more important things to do in life, which is sad. It would be not that bad if the people who did end up in Congress were the upholders of all these things, like the rule of law in our democracy. Well, let's see what happens. Who replaces whom? But I just know that it's sad when someone like a voice like Bell Hooks passes, because she was significant, a significant voice, a voice that people heard. Her obituaries in the Washington Post. I'll tell you what got me. The headline: Bell Hooks, trailblazing black feminist and social critic, dies at 69. 69. Bell Hooks was a young woman. A young woman. She died today at her home in Berea, Kentucky. 69. Bell Hooks, no caps, trailblazing black feminist whose writings anticipated and helped shape ongoing debates about race, gender, and class in the United States, died at her home. The cause was end-stage renal failure, said her sister, Gwenda Motley. She was raised in a racially segregated town in rural Kentucky. Dr. Hooks became one of the most prominent feminist writers and theorists of her generation, a poet, a memoirist, social critic, longtime professor at Berea College. She wrote more than 30 books, mixing the personal and the political in essays that examine Madonna music videos, Clarence Thomas's Supreme Court confirmation hearing, the representation of Black Americans in film, and the nature of love. Bell Hooks was born Gloria Jean Watkins, used Bell Hooks as a pseudonym, adopting the name of a maternal great-grandmother and styling it lowercase. She said she wanted to focus attention on her work, not on herself, while also paying homage to a relative with whom she shared an independent cast of mind. I was a young girl buying bubble gum at the corner store when I first really heard the full name Bell Hooks, she wrote in her 1989 book, Talking Back. I had just talked back to a grown person. Even now I can recall the surprised look, the mocking tones that informed me I must be kin to Bell Hooks, a sharp-tongued woman, a woman who spoke her mind, a woman who was not afraid to talk back. I claim this legacy of defiance, of will, of courage, affirming my link to female ancestors who were bold and daring in their speech. So now you know a little something about Bell Hooks. I've seen her quotes, I've seen some of her writing, but I've seen her more as a figure, as an icon, because you would see her quoted in a lot of different places. And so, like I said, when I saw the obit, I was taken, black women, this is the truth, black women on more than one occasion have been there to rescue me. I mean that. I was lost when I went to school back east. I went to Harvard. There was one teacher. It's always a teacher, right? It's always a teacher. Andrea Rushing. I just got rejected from the Elizabeth Bishop poetry class. Not that I was going to write poetry like Elizabeth Bishop, but I applied to the African American Studies writing class, and Andrea Rushing accepted me and helped me see. And just months before, I just gone to the East Coast. I was in New York. I knew nobody in New York. Actually, this was 3 years earlier than that. I knew no one in New York. I was a fresh-faced kid from California, like 17. But I knew Ida Lewis of Encore magazine, which was a black, kind of like Ebony, but more literary, kind of like Time. It was a black news weekly. I knew Ida Lewis. I called her up. She met with me, talked with me, connected me with some writers. There I was in New York, alone, with my big-ass suitcase. I must have looked like I'd just fallen off the turnip truck. But she saved that trip for me, Ida Lewis, by taking me under her wing. So, farewell to Bell Hooks. Trailblazing black feminist, social critic, dies at age 69 today. So, last night, were you watching the Madison Square Garden show? Were you watching Steph Curry? That was quite a show, but Steph Curry was only 5 of 14 for threes. Here's, I think, the lesson, the Steph Curry lesson. And, I talked about this yesterday, what the golden number would be, 29.74. He had to get to 29.74. That was the magic number. And, of course, at the end, he had a jersey that said 29.74. And it was great that he broke it within the first couple minutes of the game. Because after the game was interesting, but, everyone just wanted to see if Steph Curry was going to break the record, and he did. But like I said, throughout the game, what I noticed most about Stephen Curry was how many times he missed. And how many times, if you're a three-point shooter, you miss. The average three-point shooter hits 30%. That means you miss 70% of the time. 70% is a heck of a lot more than 30%. That means every time you put one up, 2/3 of the time, it's going to go doink. And those are the good shooters. The really bad ones don't take the 30%. They're less than 30%. They don't shoot the three. So there was Steph. Steph actually is more like a 35% shooter, 36% shooter. And, you say, oh, don't quibble. Well, yeah, quibble, because that 5-6% is a difference. You put up three more, just three more 3-point shots. That's 9 points. If you beat a team by 9 points, which is a pretty good beating, that's significant. So the 3-point shot did change the game. It changed the game only since Curry got in. Actually, it's been changing since Reggie Miller and the other 3-point shooter, Ray Allen. Ray Allen's had the lead, or had the record that Curry broke. But you look at Curry. Curry was 5 of 14 last night. 5 times it went in. 9 times it went doink. He missed. And if you were just a casual viewer, you'd say, wow, he misses a lot for a champion. Or you say, God, I guess I've been watching too many highlights, because every highlight film, it's like they make all the shots. They're 100% in the highlight films. So I thought it was just interesting to see how many times Stephen Curry missed. And the lesson is, if you're a champion, keep shooting. Keep practicing, keep shooting. Be 35% right, and you could be the guy who holds the record that every shot he takes from here on in that goes in establishes a new NBA record. So congratulations to Stephen Curry. Tremendous player. I'm just glad he plays for the team I root for. Golden State Warriors. But the lesson extends beyond basketball to all these other things in life. Just be 35% good and keep shooting, and you'll be great. All right, I want to talk a little about the milestone. Curry hit 29.74, surpassed it. He tied it, went beyond, hit 5 shots last night. But the milestone we worry about or think about is this COVID. 800,000. The latest from a trusted reporter on the COVID crisis is Omicron is it affects people who are vaccinated. The only way you can get positive spread is if vaccinated people catch it. And the only way vaccinated people catch it is by getting vaccinated. They feel invincible. You're not. And then they don't get hurt as much, but all the non-vaccinated people are feeling invincible, and they're getting sick, and they're flooding the hospital rooms. So that's one dynamic with Omicron. And then you've got boosters that are helping a little bit. You're not getting sick as much, but you're still getting sick. So despite being vaccinated, double vaxxed, and then a triple with the booster, you can still get it, which means you still have to be careful. You can't just go out willy-nilly and just say life is normal. And I know we're starting to see these articles about, I'm depressed. when his life, I'm fatigued. You can't be fatigued. You can't be fatigued. I recall Charlie Rangel, Representative Charlie Rangel, who once told a story about his military background, serving the war. I believe it was the Korean War. But I'm not sure actually. But there was snow. There was snow where he was. It's possible there could have been snow in Korea, but I think likely it was probably more like Europe. So, probably World War II. Well, the Rangel's not that old, but anyway. But he tells a story about being on guard with his gun, watching out for his fellow troops in the camp, fighting to stay awake. And how he knew that if he fell asleep, he would be dead. So he fought it. And fought it. Stayed awake, stayed alive. Had a decent career in Congress, representing New York. The point is, we need a little discipline now. We got to stay awake, pay attention to the stuff around us. Not give in, not pretend that this thing is over. 800,000 people are dead. And all the people who count what happens to the virus, people are predicting we're going to hit 1 million in the first quarter of 2022. So this thing that was supposed to be done real quick, not done real quick. We got to stay the course. 800,000. That's what we've topped, and now predictions that we will hit 1 million or go from 800,000 to 1 million by 2022. That is sobering. And I'll mention this because it was the first time I saw an Asian American who I knew fall to COVID. I mean, other people who died, they were more like people who had other ailments died during COVID, but not of COVID. So they couldn't get a test, or they couldn't go in, or they decided, no, one relative just gave up. She wasn't going to go through what she needed for what ailed her. And she spent the rest of her days in home hospice care. But a person I knew with COVID was my dear friend, Corky Lee. I bring up his name again because I saw Christina Wong's Sweatshop Overlord. She's performing it at the New York Theater Workshop. And, I'm in California, but she had the streaming version available for people. I bought a ticket, saw it streamed. I really loved it. I've seen it in development. I really enjoyed how it really chronicles an Asian American's response to the COVID. As Christina likes to say, it's a one-person show about COVID that doesn't suck. It doesn't. It's funny. It's well staged. It's well directed. As a practitioner of one-man shows myself, not just these radio monologues, but real one-man shows in theaters, fringe festivals around the country. she did a heck of a job off Broadway, the New York Theater Workshop. But Christina put it out on video. I don't know if it's going to be available again at some point. Maybe if you go to New York Theater Workshop, they've extended it. The last day was the 14th. Today is the 15th. But there's a special section about Corky. And it just got to me. Because for me, Corky is a benchmark. For me, Corky he's the guy closest to me who's been impacted by COVID. And he died before the vaccine. We're coming up to a year. When I first heard that something was wrong with Corky's health, and then he passed away in January. And the vaccine wasn't readily available to most people until February or March. I just know every time we reach a new milestone, 800,000, 850, 900, 950, 1 million, I'm always going to be thinking about Corky. Corky Lee, the self-described, unofficial Asian American poet laureate. If you want to hear an interview I did with him, go wherever you podcast to Emil Muck's Takeout and listen to that show. You'll hear an interview I did. Also, you can go to the ALDEF blog, aaldef.org/blog, and check out the column I did with an accompanying link to an interview with Corky Lee. So we're talking about COVID and coronavirus. One thing we need to discuss is, there are other diseases, there are other afflictions like cancer. And on this week's PETA podcast, I talk about the war on cancer. It was declared in the 70s. It was the number 2 killer. What happened? Here we are 50 years later. It's still the number 2 killer. No advancement. And the answer, I get to it on the PETA podcast, it's because the National Institutes of Health, the wing of the government that funds research, continues to do the wrong thing, continues to do something they know is wrong. So listen to the PETA podcast and you'll see what I mean. NIH continues to fund research that they know will go nowhere. They'll test on animals, knowing it has no relevance to humans. That's a fact. That's why we haven't won or made any headway on the war on cancer. I talked to 2 scientists on the PETA podcast. Check it out wherever you get your podcast. All right. Now, I also do this week a column on, we are having a reckoning about our college campuses and why things are named the way they are. Like, why was Barrows Hall named Barrows Hall at UC Berkeley? Well, it's named Barrows Hall because Barrows was a president at UC Berkeley. And just within the last couple of years, people have realized that, oh, these guys have done terrible things in their lives. And in their time, they did some things that were considered okay, but by today's standards, those actions are just downright villainous. So Barrows' sin is that he was the head of the education that went out and taught the colonized Philippines that they must have English because they were illiterate savages. Prescott Barrows, he was the head. Later on became president of UC Berkeley. So I've done a couple of columns about that, and they have renamed Barrows Hall, took the name down. It's happening all over higher ed. Princeton had a problem with Woodrow Wilson, racist. Every place has a name associated to a building because someone gave money or someone is associated with the college. And for vanity's sake, they take the money and they say, we'll name a building for you. So in diverse issues of higher ed, I wrote about how I've got some classmates. I don't really know them, but they're rich and famous, Bill Gates and Steve Ballmer. And they gave $25 million to Harvard, but they didn't want their name on the building. They didn't want to make it the Microsoft building. They didn't want to name it the Steve and Bill building. They didn't want to name it the Harvard Dropout building. They named it after their mothers. I think they think that that's a way to like skirt the fact that some people see this and they might say, this is Microsoft, the same Microsoft that use monopolistic practices to get us to use Internet Explorer. Yeah, we want to honor them. Okay, well, at least it wasn't slavery or something. I mean, I'm just saying that some people might justify it that way. Actually, the building that's named after their mother is still up there. Their mothers. But I know that Harvard's going through a renaming crisis because there was a president, at least two presidents who were slaveholders who have buildings named after them, and one big dorm, one big house, Lowell House. The guy who was named is Lowell House. He was a homophobe and an anti-Semite, and people are wondering, we got to rename, dename these buildings. So I came up with a solution because it's all about money and vanity. And if you're a college, you should like this, because if you have a gift, accept it anonymously. Say, look, we're going to get rid of vanity because we don't want to trigger trauma in subsequent generations. We'll say, oh, here I am, a scholarship student at Berkeley, and I've got to look at Barrows Hall with the name Barrows, the colonizer, and what he did to my people. I mean, people are triggered for all sorts of things. I mean, if you can hate Dave Chappelle, you can hate Prescott Barrows and seeing his name and the building where you take English 10. So Barrows, they took the name Barrows down. Now Harvard is doing, and other colleges are doing this now. They're like trying to figure, well, we need a way to figure out how to change these names. And maybe, like I said, the best way is to just accept gifts anonymously. Say, look, no naming rights. Just give us the money. You'll get your deduction. We'll use the money. You don't need the recognition that bad, do you? I mean, you're going to get the tax write-off. This way, no one has to know. Anonymous donor. That may not be transparent enough for people to say, wait, we want to know if this is clean money or dirty money. Well, I want to please sort of maybe come up with a solution that's satisfactory to both sides. The sides that want some kind of moral purity and the side that just want money. The university needs money. I'm not just talking about the Harvards. I'm talking about all the universities out there. Just take anonymous gifts. Well, Emil, if we take anonymous gifts, then what are we going to name our buildings? Well, how about the red building? Or the pink building? Or the purple building? Oh, there's the physics building. Name it after a P. Oh, that's Puce. The Puce building. If you don't like purple. Anyway, just an idea. I don't know if it's going to go over well. I mean, it was intended to be somewhat satirical, but very practical satire. Oh, there's the English building or the literature building. It's latte colored. Be creative. So as I was looking at the Harvard Crimson the other day, just seeing what other things they're writing about, because I do write about higher ed. I noticed an article by a young student. I know how young she is. She's a student, editorial director there, or directs the comp. And she wrote this great piece about discovering really a hidden secret about Harvard. Along the same lines about how I found out about the connection between UC and the colonialism in the Philippines, or actually students at UC, just uncover the truth. The president of UC, Prescott Barrows, was part of that educational department that then Governor Taft of the Philippines, he was governor of the Philippines, that was the colonial government. Well, it turns out there was another guy from Harvard who was in on that as well. And this editorial brings that up. A guy named Atkinson, who was recommended by President Eliot of Harvard, and they were all buddies, and it was the White Boys Club, the White Imperial Boys Club. And this all happened quite innocently because this one writer at Harvard had wondered aloud, why weren't there any Filipino language classes at Harvard? Which is, a reasonable question. And I've reached out to her. I'm going to try to get her on the podcast and maybe on the live stream. So we'll have her tell her story. But I know exactly how she felt 45 years ago. Actually, more like almost 50 years ago when I got there. When I was wondering, why can't I learn something about Filipino history at Harvard? And it wasn't like they were trying to bury Filipino history, but they essentially buried it. Can't learn Filipino history anywhere. It was a paragraph in my high school textbooks. But when I got to Harvard, I asked the professors there, let me study Filipino migration. There are no books. I had to go deep in the stacks at Widener. Had to go and get unpublished doctoral theses of Filipinos who were studying in some kind of joint program between the University of the Philippines and Harvard, I believe. They were doctoral theses. No books about the American or the Filipino experience in America. So that has always been kind of like my eye-opening story about colonization. And so Eleanor Wickstrom is the writer at the Harvard Crimson. She wrote this really great piece this week about how she went on this exploration and found out this truth. And when it hits you, it strikes you in a different way, because as she puts it, Harvard was the perpetrator of this thing, this colonial thing against her ancestral home, but it also enabled her to find the answer. And here she is in 2021 writing about it. And I've been thinking about it and writing about it since the mid-70s. It's a long time. And we're just two Filipinos. I mean, a handful of us around the world know and understand these things, because generally speaking, these are hidden truths. These are not exactly secrets, but just history that is generally unknown. So hopefully I'll get Eleanor on to talk about her exploration and about what it's like to be Filipino at Harvard. I mean, when I was there, really, Harvard was like, I mean, it's 25% Asian now. I guess it's like the difference between whole milk and 2% milk. I was there in the 2% milk days. Oh, let's have a vegan analogy, Emil. Okay, scrap the 2%, 20. It's 25% Asian American now, Harvard. I don't know how many Filipinos, but I would say that most of the Asian Americans are of the East Asian persuasion. And one of the things that I saw on Twitter, someone tweeted out, NPR did a story about how the experience of Filipinos and other Southeast Asians are not, they're sort of the same, but they're not when compared to other East Asians and other Asians. They're getting around to that story, but fact is, I've been talking about it ever since I lived it in the 70s, and ever since the 1980s, when Dean Henry Rosofsky, in his book Harvard, I think it was called Harvard the Manual, said, hey, Asian Americans are a strange group, because there are some Asian Americans who, they have that academic experience similar to the Chinese and the Japanese. But then you look at the Filipinos, and he mentioned the Filipinos by name. And I believe he mentioned the Vietnamese. He said, you look at the Filipinos, you look at the Vietnamese, and you see that their experience is more closely aligned with the Black population. It's been out there. People have known this. Someone tweeted out something that NPR did because, well, NPR is what NPR is, right? And people say, well. And people said the same thing I was saying. Well, we knew this 30 years ago, but glad that NPR is catching up. We're all catching up. As more of us have developed an interest in uncovering these truths. We share them with a greater audience. More people know. More people are aware. And, the fact is, if more people know about it, maybe we can prevent it from happening again, such as the case of trying to avoid repeating history. But it's difficult, right? So let's end it here. Maybe we'll get Eleanor Wickstrom on to talk about this and just her perspective. Because everything that I sense is that Harvard is going through a change. It's going through a change at the same time that the country is swinging back to pre-64. Are there people who really want to see America like it was pre-64? I mean, they didn't have Voting Rights Act. They didn't have the Immigration Act. Civil rights was a black and white fight. Is that what people want to see? Because I think we're beyond that. So it's just interesting that it takes a while. And I'm just glad that there is a young Filipino American student who sees the importance of this. And in fact, the editorial was one that, in the end, advocates for what Harvard should do with the $45 million it has received to foster a real, legitimate Asian American Studies program. It's about time. I would have, should I say I would have killed for something like that? I would have killed for something like that in my day. Where did I find something that made me feel close to comfortable at a place like Harvard? The department that was then known as the Afro-American Studies Department. All right, let's leave it there and wind up. Hey, thank you for joining me. You can read my columns at ALDEF, the Asian American Legal Defense and Education Fund blog. We like to say, hey, be here, bang the gong now, join us live. We're here Monday through Friday, 2 p.m. Pacific Live, emilguillermo.media. You can also catch the replays on amok.com. Also on YouTube, our fledgling YouTube channel, Emil Guillermo channel. Just check it out. But you can catch the replays on amok.com. I really appreciate you being here. I get to this point and I say, this is the point where I get kind of meditative. And I say, if you feel any kind of discomfort, or you don't feel like you belong, or you don't feel right, you feel out of sorts, give your elbows a hug. You belong. You're good enough. You need to be here. So I thank you for your time. And as I wish for me, I wish for you. May you be safe. May you be happy. May you be healthy. And may you live with ease. Back again tomorrow. Emil Guillermo here. Mahal kita.